Hi math friends, Graham here. Thanks for taking the opportunity to come just play around in this virtual space. I'm really honored that you've taken time out of your busy schedule to kind of play around here for the next hour. So let's not waste any time, let's jump in it. Here where we're going to talk about charting the path of early number, counting, and place value. So down below, you're going to see a chat window. And as we jump through the session here today, I'd love for you to share some of your thoughts and ideas down there. Maybe you're going to have some ahas. I hope you're not wasting your time and you'll walk away with a few ahas. Hopefully you're going to realize that you're not screwing up your kids that bad. Like you're already doing a lot of really good things. Hopefully you'll walk away with some changes in practice and you can share those in that live chat. But then also any lingering questions then that you might have. I'm sure someone during the live chat, and I'll also be able to participate there as well. So thinking about that live chat, just take a moment, read this. I'd love for you to be vulnerable here and sharing what you're thinking and experiencing through the session in the live chat. So if you're not familiar with the context, it's Sharknado. There's 9 of them now. It is a cult classic. But here's the thing. Somebody was brave enough to bring up that idea, but I think about us as primary and intermediate elementary teachers at heart. A lot of times we're okay being wrong in front of our students, but we're not okay being wrong in front of our peers. I'd love to flip that for the next hour that we play around in this space, because I promise you, nothing you put in that live chat is going to sound as awful as a bunch of sharks getting picked up by tornadoes that would eat us. Ridiculous movie, but whoever thought of that idea is a millionaire now. I think about Brene Brown, and she talks a lot about vulnerability, and vulnerability is the birthplace of professional growth. So I would love for us to take that opportunity and just share our thoughts, drop them into the live chat, and that will kind of be like our town watering hole, where we come and we kind of share ideas. So before we even get started, we're going to jump into the work here. I love 3-act tasks, and because we're starting off in kindergarten, I want to start off with one of my favorite tasks that I love doing in a kindergarten class, and we're going to use this task and scale it up all the way through 5th grade here in a minute. Not the task per se, but the ideas and thinking as we move towards the second half of the session. Here's the task. It's called Candyman. I'll link it to the website that I'll share at the end of the session, so you can then in turn give it a whirl or a test drive with your students. Here it is. So what are you wondering? I'm going to sit tight here for about 30 seconds, drop some things in the live chat. What are you wondering? What are our 5 and 6-year-olds wondering when they see this video? I'm not going to flush out a 3-act task here, but this is a 3-act task. But yeah, go ahead. I'll sit tight. 25 seconds here. What do you wonder? Drop it in the chat window. So the main question that we're after is not what a 5-year-old actually asked me one time. A 5-year-old asked me and they said, "Hey, Mr. Fletcher, is that your teeth in your hands? In your hands here?" Like I keep them in a gumball machine, right out of the mouth of babes. But you're right. The question that we're after here is how many pieces of candy are in my hand once I pulled them out of the gumball machine. And so what we do in this situation is we let the students know that we have 4 orange, 2 red, 2 yellow, 2 white. And so students now know that there's this many pieces of candy in my hand. And we know early on in kindergarten, we did this task in October. So we're like the 3rd month of school here in the Southeast in October. And at that point, not every kindergartner knows what joining is, right? So some kids are going to say 4 orange, 2 red, 2 yellow, 2 white. And I'll be like, so how many are there all together? 4 orange, 2 red, 2 yellow, 2 white. They don't know how to join them. But we give the kids this information and we just want to find out what they know, what are they thinking of, and here's some of the work that we see as we start walking around the classroom. Again, 3rd month of school. So we look at this, not quite one-to-one correspondence here. At least we have circles and we have squares. A little bit of a cluster pile, we're okay with this. We can see that they can draw 4s and 7s. But then there's some of this, where we start looking and we see that 5s and 2s on the bottom are eerily similar. That's not a fish that we're looking to fry here. This is maybe a student who's been going to Kumon since they were 2 years old. It does happen in kindergarten. It's not that often, but it definitely does happen. And then we have this student. And to be honest, this student, that's happening whether you're in kindergarten or you're in 5th grade. But I want to talk about this student in particular, because this student, I can see right now, and I'm using this task as formative assessment, and I can see that this student really doesn't know what to do in this particular instance. But what happens is this student can quickly become the black hole, right? The student who you go in to talk to, and then you don't come out for like another 20 minutes, and you're like, you get it now? And they're no better off than what you were when you first sat down with them. So every teachable moment doesn't need to be a teachable moment in that moment. So instead, I'll be with this student every day for the next month, but just not today. The Latin root word for assess means to sit beside. If you're not sitting beside a student, you're probably grading them, you're not assessing them. So what I want to do is I want to get around the classroom and I want to see what other students are actually doing with this task, because I could spend, I don't know, 20 minutes with this student right here, and I'm not going to fix this in one day. So I need to take this opportunity to go be with the other students in the classroom. And lo and behold, as I start walking around the room, I see this, but then I see this. I'm going to sit tight for about 30 seconds here. There's some coal that can be mined out of this particular problem right here. Where's the math? What do you notice? We know that there's 10 pieces of gum in my hand after we add the 4 orange, the 2 red, the 2 yellow, the 2 white. But what is going on with this piece of work, and where's the math? So because I'm not with the student that's actually drawing the circles there, I can sit down next to the student and she tells me, Mr. Fletcher, don't look at the tally marks in the top corner. She goes, you said we needed to use our whole paper. My tally marks aren't big enough. And I was like, great, a kindergartner who listens. And I said, well, tell me more. And she said, well, if I took the 4 orange, the 2 red, the 2 yellow, the 2 white, and I put them into a 10 frame, I would have no empty squares, and all of those pieces of gum would fit inside the 10 frame and there would be none left over. So I actually drew a 10 frame. And you can see that there's 5 squares on the top, 5 squares on the bottom. And she said, well, I'm not very good at drawing 10 frames, Mr. Fletcher. But she said, if you look here, I knew that 5 plus 5. So if you're looking at next to the 10 frame, you see a 5 for the top row, and then you see the numeral 5 underneath. And she says, well, I did that because I wanted you to know that I know that 5 plus 5 make 10. And this child is good, right? Like we're okay, but you wouldn't ever know what's going on with her thinking, especially with these 5s, if you just graded it by yourself at the kidney table at the back of your class or over the weekend when no students are around to advocate for their own thinking. So yeah, she's going to be okay. And then I want to introduce you to Mac. So here's Max. You see the 4 orange, the 2 red, the 2 yellow, and the, what's going on here? Well, the only way we can figure out if Mac knows this is to pull up a chair next to him. So let's hear what Mac had to say about this task.
Tell me what you got here.
1, 2, 3, 4 oranges and 1, 2 reds, 1, 2 yellows, and the white. The rest of it is white. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Whoa, so you can't see the white, but they're there?
Yes.
I love it. So Mac, what does the number 10 look like if you were going to write that down?
A 1 and a 0.
Did you guess 10?
Yes.
Oh, right on, dude. Nice.
He's such a liar. I see the eraser marks there in his estimate box. No, just kidding. Mac is good, right? So here we are. We've got Mac. We've got the young lady who can do the 10 frames. These 2 students are going to be perfectly fine. The student who did the equation is going to be perfectly fine. But right now, I want to talk about this particular student right here, because if we can move this student's thinking through a progression of learning, then we can move any student who comes into our building. We can move any student's thinking forward. So let's jump into the work now. I wanted to use that task, that story, to kind of launch this idea of early numbering counting, and then we're going to scale this up into place value in the second half of the session here. So we're going to look at the number sense trajectory. So what I'd like for you to do here is you can see these 7 terms that are on your screen. In the top right-hand corner, you see 3 rings. Each ring represents 1 minute. I want to give you 3 minutes. Don't cheat. Don't jump online. Don't look up these terms. I'd like for you to take these 7 terms and put them into order for how kids build and learn number when they come to us in kindergarten. Like, what's the trajectory? What's the progression? Place these in order, and when the 3 rings are done, I'll come back and we'll put these in order, and then we'll unpack them, and then we're going to scale it up through 5th grade. So 3 minutes, I'll be back. Go ahead, put these in order, and if you don't know what they are, don't worry about it. You will know the answer in about 3 minutes and 10 seconds. All right, let's take a look and see how the order is. And before we jump in, I'm going to say this is from Doug Clements and Julie Sarama. They've been PK2 leaders in that pre-K through 2nd grade research for many, many, many years. So this is a trajectory that is supported by, that they've found, and lots of other researchers, John Vanderwall, have really leaned into this work over the years. But yeah, let's not waste any more time. Here we are. Here's the order. What? Subitizing at the very, very front, right? Again, what I would love to do here now is we're going to take each of these and we're going to talk about these. We're going to unpack each of these. And as we unpack them, we'll begin to see how we can scale these up. So the first one, we have subitizing. So what subitizing is or subitizing if you're on the western side of the Mississippi. It's subitizing on the eastern side of the Mississippi. It's subitizing. I don't know why there's a difference, but it could be subitizing. Either way, it's just mathematical goodness that we should be doing really early on. And what Doug Clements had said in 2018 at a conference that I was at, he said many kindergarten teachers don't recognize the fact that their students can subitize before they even come to us in kindergarten. So students that are able to subitize can go ahead and say the name of a set without actually counting them. But the thing that was really eye-opening for me as I was building my own understanding is that there's two types of subitizers. There's a perceptual subitizer and there's a conceptual subitizer. At the beginning part of this trajectory, we are talking about a perceptual subitizer. So looking at that dice pattern of 5, it actually has a name. It's called a quincunx whenever anything is arranged in that pattern. A student who is a perceptual subitizer would look at that and what they would say is, oh, that's 5. And you'd be like, oh, awesome. Can you go ahead and count them for me? And the student would be like, 1, 3, 7, 9, 12. And you'd be like, what are you doing? You just told me it's 5. Well, they know that when things are arranged in that pattern, it has the name 5. The same student who could tell you that a quincunx is 5 couldn't tell you that the one on the right-hand side with the 1 dot on the top and the 4 on the bottom, they've never seen that before and they've never been told that that has the name of 5. So a great example of this is a 2-year-old who's getting drove down the road by say their mom, and they look out the window and they see those big golden arches. What do they say? McDonald's! Well, you know as well as I do, they're not reading the McDonald's words, the letters underneath. They just know when they see that M, it's McDonald's. And that's exactly what a perceptual subitizer is able to do. A conceptual subitizer is what I think most of us are familiar with. A perceptual subitizer is a student who's able to articulate why it's 5 conceptually. So with the quincunx, they might say, oh, I see like 4 corners and then 1 in the middle, and 4 corners and 1 in the middle is 5. Or they might say, I see 4 on the bottom and 1 more on top, and they're able to conceptually articulate why it is that number. So big difference here. We're not talking about a conceptual subitizer at the beginning of this trajectory. We're only talking about a perceptual subitizer. So then from subitizing, we then go to comparison. Both of these, they develop, they can develop at the same kind of time here, but both can be developed before kids come to school. And so how can comparison be that way? And a lot of times we think about the greater than, less than symbol, but here we're just talking about comparing visually. If I have 2 piles of candy, I have the blue ones on the left and I have the white ones on the right, and I ask a 2-year-old, and there's not a single 2-year-old in this world that I personally know, if I was to ask them, hey, which color candy do you want? I don't know of a 2-year-old that would say the white pile, because they can visually see that there's more blue. When we're talking about comparison in the early stages of this trajectory, we're talking about visual comparison. So right now, comparing isn't a headache at all. But if we change, now you visually can't compare. So to quote Dan Meyer and his headache and aspirin analogy, well, right now, the headache of comparison, our comparison is our headache. So in order to compare these, we can't visually compare, we're going to need to count. And so in order to count, we first need to know that stable order. We need to know that rote counting process. And all that is just the number order, that stable order, where 3 always comes after 2 and 3 is always before 4. Very similarly, it's just like the alphabet, where kids say elemental P and they think that's 1 letter. but obviously it's much more than just one letter. Then we get into one-to-one correspondence. And all that one-to-one correspondence means is it's more along the lines of tagging, where students are tagging a number name with an object, to where it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you can see there that by messing up with that count sequence, I'm not just assessing rote counting, but that's something that we often do, right? Like our finger is doing the one-to-one correspondence for students, right? Like if we go back and we redo this, where we might go ahead and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And my finger is doing the one-to-one correspondence for students, and all they're doing is rote counting. So once students have that rote counting and they've learned that ability of tagging, I want to mess around with the count sequence, where it goes fast and then slow, maybe 3 numbers, and not in such a nice, neat rhythm. Then we get into cardinality, and all cardinality is the last number in the count sequence defines the quantity in the set. So let's look at what cardinality is not. This is one of my favorite videos that just demonstrates just where a student is on the precipice of doesn't quite have cardinality. This is my a little buddy of mine. His name is Crosby. Here we go.
So Crosby, tell me how many are in there?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So how many are in there?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
How many are in there?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7.
Oh, nice. So how many are in there?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Oh, that's awesome. So how many are in there?
You can't say it all.
Awesome, buddy. Thank you.
I love that video, right? Like if you're not a teacher, you think I'm the crazy one there. But so often we think that we're assessing cardinality, but we're not unless we ask that follow-up question of, so how many are there? And you could see there that he had rote counting, he had one-to-one correspondence, but he had to always go back and recount to see how many there were, so he doesn't have cardinality. So this is where we've now identified the right headache. And now, because we identify where that thinking is within the trajectory, we can put in the right intervention to keep their thinking moving through this trajectory or progression. So what we ended up doing with Crosby is we gave him cups, and we would say, like, put 5. He put 5 into the cup, and then we'd take the cup away and we'd be like, how many did you put in there? And he'd be like, oh. So we'd give them back to him and say, this time what you put in there, we want you to remember. Now, a couple times it didn't quite work, and then eventually he got it. And then about 3 weeks later, Crosby came over to our house, and we were playing with Legos. And when you know the headache, you know the exact aspirin to put in place. And you'll also pick up another thing that we added just to move his thinking forward. Here we go.
Hey, Crosby.
What?
What are you doing, buddy?
Playing Legos?
You're playing Legos?
Yeah.
Nice. You tell me how many people you have over here? Can you count for me?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6.
How many people do you have over there?
6.
How many?
6.
Hey, Crosby, how many people do you have over here?
6.
Yeah, buddy. Nailed it.
So you could also probably hear that when he was counting, we had him always repeat, when you're done counting the last object, say that name twice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. And that's how we can intentionally and efficiently move him past that barrier of cardinality that he didn't quite have at that moment. So then from there, after cardinality, so we've gone subitizing, comparison, rote counting, one-to-one correspondence, cardinality, we jump into hierarchical inclusion. And all that means is that numbers are nested within one another. So in other words, like if you have 10 of something, you also have 9 of something, you also have 8 of something. And a way that we can check to see if a student has hierarchical inclusion is just like with this as an example, where we ask a student from a pile of counters, can you count me 5? And they go ahead and they count out 5, and then I play a little stupid. I'm like, oh, sorry, I don't need 5, I need 4. Well, a student who doesn't have hierarchical inclusion, they're gonna push all of those 5 counters back into the pile and recount back out 4. But a student who does have hierarchical inclusion, all they're gonna do is they know that 4 is nested within 5, so they're going to remove that 5th counter and they will be left with 4. And then at the very end is where we get into number conservation. And all that means is that numbers can be decomposed. So 5 could be 2, 1, and 2. It could be 1 on top and 4 on the bottom. It could be 2 and 3. It means that number is conserved. So no matter how much we break it up, it's still going to be the same. Think of number conservation as like decomposition of number. You could also look at this idea, which is the North Star of K1 teachers, which is unitizing, where a group of 10 is also 10 ones. It can be decomposed, it can be conserved into 10 ones, and 10 ones can also be put into a group of 10. So that idea of unitizing also falls in just around this place of number conservation. So here's kind of the layout. We kind of worked our way through these: subitizing, comparison, counting, one-to-one correspondence, cardinality, hierarchical inclusion, and number conservation. So now that we kind of see this trajectory, before we jump outside of this range of 0 to 20 and go up through 120 and then through 500 and then fractions and decimals, let's just check out some classroom action. So here is a first grade student, and this first grade student is working on this problem. Annie has blank glasses of pink and yellow lemonade. She has the same number of glasses of each type of lemonade. How many glasses of each type does Annie have? So this little guy, he's chosen 18. So he's chose 18 and 18 glasses of lemonade, but he needs the same number of pink and the same number of red. This is a definite example of what number conservation is. But as you're watching this video, think about how many times you might want to jump in and rescue this student. But I'd also like for you to think about the number sense trajectory. Watch how many times he might need to go back and recount something. Watch and see where he has one-to-one correspondence, where he has hierarchical inclusion. This video really has everything that we just talked about. It's one of my favorite videos alongside Mac that I've been able to capture over the years. And I promise you, no student was hurt in the recording of this video. But yeah, here it is, my favorite video, probably of all time.
One's over here.
So I see a 10 and then some 8 ones. Let me ask this question, Caden. Caden, if you had 18 glasses of lemonade and you had the same number of pink and you had the same number of yellow, how many would you have of each color?
Hey, do a different one, he said. Do a different one. You're not doing 6 anymore. You've done 6. You're going to have to do another one.
Like 8.
Pick another.
8 and 8.
8 and 8? And how many would that be? 8 and 8?
16.
Interesting. If you can prove it with those.
What does he do?
And how many do you have there?
18.
And what do you notice about your 18 there?
Like, he's more, then there's 2 more than the 8.
So do you have the same number of each glass?
No, unless I had 28.
Okay. Well, what happens if you needed 18 and you needed to have the same number of each color? Could you make that?
I could erase all this.
Well, here, let's not worry about erasing it right now. Let's just turn this over. How could you build 18 and use the same number of each color? Because you don't have 18 yellows, do you?
Oh, I have 10 yellows and 8 pinks.
Okay.
That's how much I have now to make 18. If I have big 28.
But do you have the same number of each color now? What happens if, so what could you do to try and make them the same number?
I could try making a different number.
But we have to stay with 18. Does it have to be 10 and 8? Is that the only way you can make 18?
You could make it a different way.
How could you make it?
Wait 1 minute. I have 5 and 5 to make 10, right?
Okay.
Then I have 8 more.
But you still have how many yellows?
10.
But you still have 10 yellows.
Yeah, but I'm
Now how many do you have?
8.
8 of each color? And how many is 8 of each color?
16.
And how many do you need?
I would add those to it.
But now you don't have the same of each color.
This is kind of tricky.
It is getting kind of tricky, isn't it?
19 plus 9 plus 9 equals 8.
9 plus 9 equals...
18.
So whoa, wait a minute. So now you're saying that you have 18 here?
Because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
And do you have the same of each color?
Yes.
So let me ask this question. Let's go back to this piece of paper. If you have 18 glasses of lemonade and you have the same number of each color, how many do you have of each color?
9 and 9.
So which one's right then? Don't erase it. What happened here? Why doesn't this one work?
Because there was actually a 10 and 8 less.
So 8 is less than 10?
That's why I need to take away this one and add 1 to the 8.
So let me ask this question then. If you had 12 glasses of lemonade,
I would split into 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
and how do you know that it's 6?
Because 6 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 equals 9, right?
Right.
And then I would add 1 more 3 to the 9 to make 12.
Gotcha.
And
Let me ask this question. What if it was 28?
I would use 2 10s, and then I would need 8 more.
And then what are you going to do with that 8 more?
Add it to these.
Would you go 8 of just one color?
4 pink, 4 yellow.
And how many would that give you of each color?
8.
If you had 10 and then another 4.
28 mixed when they're both together.
And when you separate them, how many do you have of each color?
I do.
And if that was pink, how many would there be there?
14.
What an awesome video, right? And as you can see that a lot of times we want to jump in and rescue students, but these are some really big number ideas that we have to allow kids and give kids the opportunity to grapple with and not look to jump in and rescue them ASAP. I'm totally guilty of that. And to be honest, I watched that video and I'm proud of myself because I can think back to how many times I would have jumped in and want to rescue that student. And he didn't need rescuing. He just needed time. He was grappling. I just got to get out of his way, ask a little question here or there. But I love that video. You can see to where he just snaps one off of the 10 to get to 9, starts moving it around. He's decomposing it into 2 parts where with the 12, he's like, 12 is 3, 3, 3, and 3, right? Like, I love the thinking that's happening in that video. So let's do this now. What we're going to do is we're going to take subitizing off the list and we're going to blow this up. We're going to scale this up with extending beyond 20. Like if kids build number like this in kindergarten, it should be the same beyond 20 as well. I know a lot of the times when talking with 2nd and 3rd grade teachers, I'm guilty as well as a 3rd grade teacher, right? Like my students don't understand place value. Like we all say that, but place value isn't something that really can be taught in a textbook or a program. It needs to be developed through these rich counting routines that we've just talked about here, these big number concepts, but then we'll also share some ideas here along the way of where you can now begin to build this understanding and scale up this number sense trajectory. I love this question here. This tells me a lot about what's happening in a classroom. Like, how many 10s are there in the number 173? You're probably saying 17 right away. A lot of kids just say 7 because we teach place value as hundreds, 10s, and 1s. But I'm looking for the student who says 17. And the student who says 17, well, they've probably counted 173 and seen 17 piles of 10 around the room. So this is the place value that we're really looking for here. Now, I want to kind of talk about this piece. So if we take subitizing off of this, because subitizing is through 5, and we're looking to blow this up through 1,000. So you're not going to be able to subitize. So that's why I've kind of removed subitizing from the list here. But if we look at all of these, yeah, we should be doing all of these in a first, second, and third grade classroom. And I think about this. If we think and we know now that number conservation is decomposition of numbers, like second, third grade teachers, that's our jam. That's what we need to be doing. We want our kids, like every night, we pray that our kids can decompose numbers. But that's the end of this trajectory. So we're expecting that kids can decompose numbers that they've never counted to. Crazy, right? Or we're expecting that kids can do operations of thinking, right? Second and third grade, adding through 1,000. We expect that kids can add numbers and subtract numbers that they've never even counted to. I'll put this into perspective. Think about kindergarten. A kindergarten teacher would never go to one of their students and say, hey, I want you to decompose 17, but I know that you can't count to it. Or I want you to know that 17 is a group of 10 and 7 loose ones. We would never do that in kindergarten, but that's quickly become our expectation as second and third grade teachers. And so I think about this analogy. I know nothing about cars, absolutely nothing. I could take the 4 wheels off my car, change my tires, and that's about it. Like, I couldn't tell you where the first bolt is to take that car apart. If I go to car camp, something that I've never would actually do, but I learn how to build a car, I would know how to take a car apart. How many times are we expecting that our students are able to decompose the automobile of number, but they've never actually built that automobile of number? So that's where I think this session and these ideas, we really need to be more intentional about giving our students opportunities to play around with these ideas in our classroom. So let's just jump in here and we're going to scale this up now. So the first one, we've got comparison. So with comparison, it might just be putting 2 piles on the ground here and saying, hey, which one is more? Is there more on the left side? Is there more on the right side? You can visually see that there is more on the left. So one part that I didn't mention when we were talking about comparison early on in the kindergarten classroom, like through 20, is there's 2 conflicting ideas here that we're trying to have students grapple with when they're in kindergarten and with this language of more and less. It is a beast in kindergarten and first grade. But where I would screw up is I would have students compare like 6 and 7, or maybe like 5 and 4. And visually, those are so close together that students are grappling with both the language of more and less and the quantities of more and less. So when we first start talking about this idea of more and less comparison, we want them to be vastly different. And so that students can basically grapple with that language of more and less and not be confused with the quantities. Then as students begin to understand the language and the vocabulary of more and less, we start making our number sets tighter. So maybe we start off with 2 and 9, which is more, which is less. Then maybe we go like, we do that for a day. Then we big quantities, differences. And then we start moving them in closer together. Same thing I'm thinking about as we go through 120. And because what happens is many students are grappling with both the language of more and less and the quantity of more and less. And that's why more and less really becomes a difficult concept for so many students, especially our multilingual learners. So then we jump into counting, not quite rote counting, but definitely counting with choral counting. This is one of my favorite routines that I've really kind of picked up here over the last 5-6 years. I love this book, Choral Counting and Counting Collections, 3 amazing authors. If you're not following their work, maybe you recognize some of them, but if you're not following their work, you definitely want to. There is a wealth of knowledge and stories in this book. But the big thing here is that choral counting is not like round robin counting. It's because that actually adds pressure and anxiety to students. So here we're going to work with choral counting. It's a whole class activity. And as we're counting, I'm recording the numbers on the board first as students are saying them. Here we go. So what we're going to do here is we're going to count by 40. From 22 to 782. I wouldn't be doing this on the first day, but yeah, so let's go ahead and do this. What comes next? What comes next? Next, next, next. Keep going. And then you start to see it now. And I want to ask you, what patterns do you see here? I'll sit tight for about 15-20 seconds. What patterns are screaming at you right now? So maybe you noticed that all of the ones places have a 2. Why is that? Well, it's because we're counting by a multiple of 10. Then maybe you notice that the tens place and the ones place also kind of have the same number. Maybe you notice that each row increases by 200. Why is that? Well, because we're counting by 45 times. 40 times 5 is 200, 5 numbers in each row. Lots of different patterns here, but then we can also have kids make predictions here. Like what number would come here? Right? 942. What number would come here? 1182. The big piece here is that I'm not just whimsically getting up and just randomly throwing these numbers on the board. There's a lot of intentionality and planning. It takes maybe 2-3 minutes to go ahead and plan one of these out. You can go vertically, horizontally, you can count up, you can count down, you can count left, right, left. Lots of different ways that you can do this. Choral counting is something we need to be doing in our classrooms at least once a week. Berkeley Everett has a wonderful website that I'll add to the resources page that you'll definitely want to check out. And you can see lots of the ways that he's captured student thinking, but also teachers have shared with him a lot of the choral counts that they've been doing with their students all over the world. And so one of the things here that I love about this is I think about those first grade teachers that are like, man, my kids stink at counting by 10 when they're not on the decade, right? Where you start at like, okay, we're gonna count by tens, let's start at 12. And we lose kids. Well, it's because we rote count by tens in kindergarten. So we don't actually rote count. There's more of an operational sense that needs to be taking place here. So even in first grade, I might want to say, well, today we're going to start at 12. We're going to count by tens up all the way to 320. But I know you don't go to 320 in first grade, but it's fair game because there's patterns there that we can talk about. And when we talk about those patterns, that's what allows us to discuss that place value understanding that we are all after. So we've done comparison, we've done rote counting, and now is where we're going to jump into one-to-one correspondence and cardinality. And I've kind of combined the two of them here. And with that, we're going to do counting collections. And we're going to give students bags of things, and we're going to just have them count. We want them to understand how to group these different things. Funny story here. I was in a first grade classroom. We were doing counting collections. This little guy is going ahead and counting his pile. I think he had like 72. I'm just going to say 72. I don't remember the exact number. He wanted to count by himself. And so I walk over to him like, hey, tell me how many you got here. And he's like, oh, I forgot. You interrupted me. And I was like, oh, sorry, my bad. And so I walk away but I keep an eye on him because I know he's counting by ones. I chat with a couple ladies that are working on their counting collection, and when he gets halfway through his count again, I walk back over and I'm like, hey, I looked over at the lunch menu today's hamburgers and hot dogs. What are you gonna have? And he's like, I'm gonna have a dog, Mr. Fletcher. And I was like, oh, nice. I said, I like hot dogs too. And I said, so what number are you at? He goes, oh, you keep interrupting me and I can't get through everything. And he said, He said, it's taking me a long time. I need more time. I said, well, what are you counting by? And he said, well, I'm counting by ones. I said, that's taking a long time, isn't it? He goes, yeah. Here's where we would typically say, well, why don't you try tens? So instead, I say, well, do you want to try counting by something else? And he says, yeah, let's try threes. So I jump down there this time. We put him all into groups of three. He starts counting. He's like 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. He goes, I can't count by threes. And I was like, neither can I, bud. He goes, I can only count by ones and tens. Let me count by tens. So we put them into tens, and then you see how he counts them. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 71, 72, and then we're good. A lot of the times we're the ones telling kids to count by tens, but they've never experienced that counting by threes and sevens suck. So when I think about this bag of pony beads or this bag of buttons, if you were to give that to your group of fifth graders, how many of them would count them out one by one by one by one? Right? So this is one of those ideas to where now what we can do is we don't have to wait to bring the operations into the counting. We can combine the two of them. So we give students a bag and we're like, estimate how many's in your bag. Count them. How far off was your estimate from your actual? How far are you away from your nearest 100? How far are you away from your nearest 10? Third grade teachers speaking to us about rounding, right? So this is a great opportunity to embed a lot of different number concepts into one little routine, and then you can have students write the numbers on their post-it, stick it on their forehead, and have them line themselves up at the front of the classroom, and they need to put themselves in number order. There you have number order and sequence. One routine, counting collections. You've talked about ordering, rounding, subtraction, estimation, 15, 20-minute routine, and you are good to go. Because kids need to understand the size and magnitude of number, right? Like when we talk about 10,000, it's a big number, but I love this picture here, right? I'm looking at this student here. Like that is a 10,000 wall right there. Sorry, that is a 100,000 wall there. But there's also a little pattern going on when you see that teeny tiny cube on the right-hand side. It goes cube, stick, flat, cube, stick, flat, and that will just keep on increasing. But what happens is students, when they're looking at that 100,000 wall, because they haven't counted and we put base 10 blocks into their hands too quickly, they don't really understand that 100,000 wall really has 100,000 of those little cubes on the right. Mind-blowing. This was a lot of fun. I had to actually go to a couple schools to get that many thousands blocked, but it has paid itself dividends in the long run. So before we kind of jump away here, what I want to do is I want to quickly make a connection here. And I think a lot of the times what happens is that we put base 10 blocks into students' hands too quickly because there's that unitizing that we talked about. So if I'm a kindergarten first grade teacher, I'm never, ever, period, ever using base 10 blocks. I'm using unifix cubes, snap cubes, linking cubes, because when I give a kid a 10 rod and 10 loose ones, they can't make the 10 ones do the same thing as the stick. But with these, I can take it apart, put it together, take it apart, put it together. And that's what helps build that understanding of unitizing. If you want to know why students really struggle with regrouping in second grade, a lot of the reason is because we put base 10 blocks into their hands prematurely in a kindergarten or first grade classroom. And many of our second grade students aren't quite ready for those base 10 blocks because they haven't really practiced counting sets in a K1 classroom. But Len, I want to take this idea of base 10 blocks and I quickly want to connect it vertically to decimals in 4th and 5th grade. So if you teach like 5th grade, you've probably said, my kids don't understand decimals. And like, what's our go-to manipulative when we think about decimals? Well, we go right to base 10 blocks and we ruin students because we tell them that this hundreds plate that you've been calling a hundreds plate for your entire life is no longer a hundreds plate, it's now a whole. It just ruins them. So again, we're too quickly to jump in and show them the base 10 blocks as for decimals. So one of my favorite tools that I love taking along with that scalability is a 10 frame. So let's kind of unpack this thinking here. Well, in a kindergarten and first grade classroom, students know that this is a 10 frame. And if they have 7 counters on their 10 frame, it's 7. But what would happen if we now told those students in 5th grade and 4th grade, where we begin to develop the decimal understanding, that a 10 frame is the whole? So now what happens is that if a student has 4 squares filled in on their 10 frame, they have 4/10 of their 10 frame is complete. One of the things that makes decimals and base 10 blocks really difficult is that we can't actually partition the base 10 blocks. There's a fair trade that needs to take place, which is really, really abstract. But here, if we say this is a whole 10 frame, students can make that connection. And then what happens is if we take a 10th and then we partition up that 10th, well, now you can see that we have 7/100ths of our 10 frame. And then we can go even one step farther and break it down into thousandths. And here you can see that we have 23 thousandths. I love this Decimat. This is a great tool to help build an understanding of decimals because students can keep on partitioning and making it smaller and smaller and smaller, which is the really big piece that we want them to understand with decimals. So just a quick little connection there with decimals and 10 frames and the scalability of tools. And then like we did early on, we'll talk about hierarchical inclusion, where students need to know that if you have 70 and you take one away, you have one less, and that would be 69. And then we have number conservation, and all that means is that numbers can be decomposed in multiple different ways. Lots of understanding that's going on. So just showing the scalability of these ideas, and now you've seen how we can walk through comparison counting, and we do it within 20, we do it within 100, we do it within 500, we do it within 1,000. And now what we'll do is, we've already kind of talked a little bit about decimals. You could walk through this with those decimats. You could also use decimal squares is another way that you can do this instead of using the base 10 blocks. But now what we'll like to do is kind of briefly work through this 2-3 minutes here. Let's look at what this could look like with fractions, because a lot of the times when we talk about fractions, we throw the baby out with the bathwater and we don't try to leverage any of the whole number understandings that our students are already coming to us with. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump in. Subitizing fractions. What do you see here? What fraction is red? Ready? Go. Yep, so you saw 3/1/4, right? So 1/4 is the unit that we're counting here, so 3/1/4. Next one, ready? Yep, you probably said it, 2/1/3, right? Because now before we were counting dots, here we're counting 1/3. Again, that's the unit. We could say 2 donkeys, 2/1/3. We're just counting the number of parts here. Next one. Right? 3/1/8. Then we jump into comparison, and where we go wrong with comparison a lot of times is that we're too quick to jump to fraction notation. We want students to visually see the difference, where when you say, hey, which one is more, but when you show a 1/8, like fraction notation, and you show them a 1/2 for a half, what you end up saying is when the number on the bottom is smaller, the pieces are actually larger. But when the numbers on the pieces are larger on the bottom, the pieces are actually, that is a word salad for so many students. So instead, just show them pictures and then add on the fraction notation so that they have that understanding. Then we could also do rote counting, where now we're going to do one that we would do in 4th grade. So here we're going to count by 3/4. Just kind of give you an example if we were counting by 3/4. You can see here now that we're going vertically top to bottom, still left to right, but in columns, not rows. You'll be able to see lots of patterns here. In a 3rd grade classroom, we might just count by unit fractions. 1 1/3, 2 1/3, 3 1/3, 4 1/3, right? And so on and so on. Then we get to one-to-one correspondence where now we're just counting the parts. 1 1/6, 2 1/6, 3 1/6, 4 1/6. Cardinality, that's kind of coming into place with what we were just doing there as well. Hierarchical inclusion, remembering that numbers are nested within each other. So if you have 7 1/8, you know that you're one part away from a whole. And then you have number conservation. And with number conservation, all that really means is that when you have these parts right here, you can transpose and move these parts around however you would like. What's the sum of these 3 parts if one square is the whole? I'll sit tight for about 10 seconds. Can you transpose and move them around? So when you think about it, you probably just realize that you're adding 5/8 plus 1/8 plus a half. And if I give those to you as fraction notation, you're going to go ahead, find a common denominator. But if we think about the parts of a whole and visually how to decompose these, if you see them as 5 1/8, you can take that one random eighth on top of the 5, drag it down and join it with the 1/8 that's by itself, and slide over the half to make one whole. So you'd have 1 whole and 2/8, or 1 whole and 1/4. It's that decomposition of flexibly thinking and moving around those parts. So there we have it. We've kind of worked through this early number and counting trajectory. Then we've built it up through place value. Then we've made some connections with what this could look like with fractions, and then made a little connection there with decimals. But this is where it is. And I think we have to be more intentional about really looking for these ideas in our classrooms. And as we look to wrap up, I just want to leave you with a progression video. I'm always adding new progression videos to my website, also new tasks and resources. But here's one that I think came out maybe about 7, 8 years ago. But it's the progression of early number and counting. Check it out.
Before we ever get to addition and subtraction, and long before we tackle fractions and decimals, there's so much understanding that needs to take place. So here, I'll try to explain the progression of early number and counting. Well, before students come to us in kindergarten, they begin to see what numbers look like. I mean, literally. Check out these dice. Students know that there's 4, 2, 3, and 5, but they don't know that quantity. They're just simply calling out number names and matching them to what the things look like. They know that we have 3, 3, 5, and 4 on the yellow card. What they're doing is matching a number name to a visual pattern. This is a really big piece, but a lot of kids are able to do this before they come to us in kindergarten. This ability to recognize quantity without counting one-to-one is called subitizing. Some say sub, some say su. I just say it's magic. But here, if we were to show the number 4, a student might say 4! Yes, they know the number name, but if you ask them to prove it, they might count them 1, 3, 9, 7. This is a perceptual subitizer. They cannot explain why it's 4. I think most of us are familiar with the conceptual subitizer that would say 4 because there's 2 and 2 more. In this early trajectory, we're talking about a perceptual subitizer. So as students are working on this idea of subitizing, they're simultaneously building their understanding of more and less. Let's take these 2 hands, for example. If we were to put some candy in each hand, and then we were to ask a student, which one has more? I think most students are going to say the one on the right has more. And they're able to recognize this because they can visually see and compare the difference. They can't tell you exactly how many more, but that visual representation of more Well, that ties back to what they're doing with subitizing. The students don't need to count to compare the quantities. If we were to take some candies from the right hand, put them in the left hand to where they're equal or almost the same, now we have a need to count. So when students come to us in kindergarten, we now know that they have this idea of subitizing and more or less that they've been working on. So from there, we introduce rote counting. Rote counting, well, it's kind of like this. As students are learning the alphabet, they might say LMNOP and have no idea that there's actually letters embedded in there. Rote counting, same thing. Students are just working on that count sequence, the reciting of names. So an example of that would be as if we asked a student to count from 1 to 6. They might say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We said stop at 6. But you know what? They can't. They have no idea where 6 is in that count sequence. Well, in kindergarten, students should be working on that count sequence from 0 to 100, forwards and backwards. I think most students in kindergarten have had exposure to a hundreds chart or a 99 chart. But what about this one on the right? When the value increases, the numbers on the chart rise up. Now when we count up from 0, we don't go down, we actually go up. That might make more sense to kids. Something to think about. So as students are working on this idea of rote counting, we begin to introduce this idea of one-to-one correspondence. And to be honest, one-to-one correspondence, it's much more than simply tagging numbers to objects. Here's an example. If we ask a student to count 8 and place them in the bowl from a set, and they're able to do that, they're a producer of counting. They're able to do that one-to-one tagging to 8. Now, if you ask them how many were in the bowl, they don't know. They'd have to go back and recount them all over. A student that we'd ask how many didn't make it inside the bowl, well, they're a counter. They can count a finite set of a quantity. So for instance, there was 4 that couldn't make it. So we want to make sure that students are both counters and producers. And one way we can do that is by building this understanding of tagging, but not always with numbers. So here we have 6 bears, and we want to match each bear to a green present. This idea that's happening in one-to-one correspondence, it's really, really big, and we need to make sure that we devote enough time for our students to develop this understanding. So as students are working on rote counting and one-to-one correspondence, cardinality gradually makes its way into the conversation. What cardinality is when students are counting out a set of objects. The last number in that count sequence describes the quantity in the set. Students might count this pattern here of these pennies, but they might double count some. So now they use a counting strategy where they line them up and count from 1 to 8, and they know that they said 8 last, so that there's 8 in the count sequence. This was an example of a counter with the pennies, and on the bottom here with the rec and rec, we have a producer of 8. And they're able to tell you that it's 8 because of the last number. We then move on to hierarchical inclusion. Yeah, it's a really big word, but all that it means is that students understand that numbers are nested inside other numbers. So if we take that penny, for example, students would know that if you had 8 pennies, you must have 7 pennies. That numbers are nested inside the numbers. So if we ask students to put 7 inside this circle, do they need to count out 7 pennies, or do they just remove 1 and drag the set into the circle? The same idea with the rec and rec. Do students count out 7, or do they just know to remove 1 because 7 is nested within the 8? And at the final part of this progression of early numbering counting comes number conservation. The big idea here is that students understand that there's a decomposition of number. We might ask, are they the same? Students would say, yeah, we have the same number. But if we stretch out the blue row and ask which one has more, students might say the blue. This is at the heart of number conservation. It's about decomposition, that numbers can be broken apart, and that numbers, the whole, is made up from parts. So at the beginning, we talked about a perceptual subitizer. Well, here we have 3 sets of 4. Well, when students get to this piece in the number sense trajectory, they understand that 4 is made up from parts. So now when we show students these dots and we show them these yellow cards, they're able to see that 4 just isn't a name, it describes the parts of a whole. Now we're getting to that conceptual subitizing. There's a whole lot happening here. One thing to remember, the turtle won the race.
So there you have it. Lots of understanding that's going on here, and you can go back and revisit this at any time. It's always open. Sharing it with your teachers and your colleagues and having this conversation about how we build number in kindergarten and what that can look like as we begin to grow vertically with our understanding. Because again, if you teach 3rd grade, you don't teach 3rd grade. What you teach are 9 and 10-year-olds, 8 and 9-year-olds who function at a kindergarten through 5th grade level. So it's important that we understand the number understandings that kids might have been missing from kindergarten so that we can get our 3rd graders caught back up to speed. So hopefully you've been able to share some ahas, what you're doing well, lingering questions, changes in your practice. I just want to say thanks again for coming to the session. Here's where you can find the slides and the resources for this talk. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me through the contact me on my website. But it's been a blast hanging out here with you, my friends. I wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay well. Take care.